Diabetes Connections is brought to you by the only ultra-rapid-acting inhaled insulin, by Dexcom, keeping you in control with an integrated system for diabetes management, and by ViviCap. Keep your insulin at the exact right temperature, even in extreme heat or cold.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, when the FDA cleared the FreeStyle Libre 2 and 3 iCGM sensors, it meant a big leap forward for interoperability. Now, pumps, including Tandem's t:slim X2, can work with two different sensors, Libre and Dexcom.
So our goal, as we stated it, is to launch an integrated offering within 1 to 2 quarters of Abbott receiving FDA clearance. And we're trying to now, really work to hit that goal. And again, make it a really, really good experience for users.
That's Dr. Jordan Pinsker, Medical Director for Tandem Diabetes. He has extensive experience with automated system. He's pretty much been there since the beginning. We talk about the long process to bring them to market, how they're changing lives, and what is still yet to come. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. I am your host, Stacey Sims, and I'm so glad to have you here every week. My son was diagnosed with type 1 right before he turned 2. He is now 18. My husband lives with type 2. I do not have diabetes, but I spent my professional career in broadcasting, and that is how you get the podcast. There is so much going on in terms of diabetes news right now. I'm going to save most of it for the In the News episodes that I do twice a month, but I want to touch on some of it here because it's important to know going into this interview. As you've likely heard, the US FDA has cleared the FreeStyle Libre 2 and FreeStyle Libre 3 iCGM system sensors for integration with automated insulin delivery systems. We've been watching this for a long time. If you're not familiar, this means that as Dexcom is integrated with Omnipod 5 and integrated with Tandem's Control-IQ, Libre sensors can now be used in the same way. These sensors are not yet available in the US, but Omnipod and Tandem both have agreements with Abbott, the company that makes them, to integrate them. And both companies are already at work to do so. I am hoping to talk to the folks at Omnipod soon, and we are going to talk today with Dr. Pinsker from Tandem about how this is going to work and a lot more really about what else Tandem is working on. Okay, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Afrezza. And if you are a regular listener, you've heard me talk about Afrezza, the only ultra-rapid-acting inhaled mealtime insulin. But did you know it is both fast in and fast out? Now, fast in means it can start to control blood sugar in about 12 minutes. Fast out means it leaves your body after about 1.5 to 3 hours for the 4-unit and 12-unit cartridges, respectively. This gives you the flexibility to take additional doses if needed based on your blood glucose levels after meals. Find out more and see if Afrezza is right for you. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Afrezza logo. Afrezza can cause serious side effects, including sudden lung problems and low potassium, and is not for patients with chronic lung disease such as asthma or COPD, or for patients allergic to insulin. Tell your doctor if you ever smoked, ever had kidney or liver problems, a history of lung cancer, or if you are pregnant or breastfeeding. Most common side effects are low blood sugar, cough, and sore throat. Severe low blood sugar can be fatal. Do not replace long-acting insulin with Afrezza. Afrezza is not for use to treat diabetic ketoacidosis. Please see full prescribing information, including boxed warning, medication guide, and instructions for use on Afrezza.com/safety. My guest this week is Dr. Jordan Pinsker. He is the Vice President and Medical Director for Tandem Diabetes Care. As a pediatric endocrinologist, he has assisted in the design and study of automated insulin delivery systems. Before joining Tandem, he was the director of the artificial pancreas technology at the Samsung Diabetes Research Institute in California and lead investigator in numerous clinical trials on automated systems. And before that, he served in the United States Army and the California Army National Guard for more than 20 years as a physician. A lot to talk about with Dr. Pinsker, so let's get to it. Dr. Pinsker, welcome to Diabetes Connections. I'm really excited to talk to you. Thanks for spending some time with me and my listeners.
Stacey, thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
I have a lot of questions from listeners to get through, some nuts and bolts, but I want to take a step back, and I'm going to try to do this a few times during our time together, because you have such vast experience in the artificial pancreas research and even more than that. So let me start by asking, you've been with Tandem for about 2 years now. Can you tell us, why did you go to Tandem? What are you hoping to accomplish there?
So I came to Tandem 2 years ago as the medical director because Tandem's mission is really all about making diabetes care easier for everyone and reducing burden while still getting, the great glycemic control and all the outcomes and the medical outcomes we want to get. And I brought a perspective to this, thinking back years and years and years ago. I'm a pediatric endocrinologist by training, and I actually took a slightly different path than most people. I received a scholarship for medical school from the Army. And so after medical school, I did my residency in pediatric endocrinology fellowship in the Army, and I ended up doing 20 years in the Army as a physician, as an endocrinologist. And we ended up taking care of not just my direct patients, but their families, the family members who ended up having diabetes, right? And I spent most of my time doing diabetes care in clinical practice. And gradually, I got involved in what at the time was called artificial pancreas research. It was a real interest of mine to try to make everything sort of computer programmable, but also recognizing that people have a lot of different needs, and we have to work with everyone. And, we can't make an algorithm for everything. So when we started these projects way back when, we barely had working CGM, right? We had pumps that did not have any of this automation built into the pump. That came much, much later. So we were using what now are considered very rudimentary cell phones. And we had patients and individuals would come in who were so dedicated and say, I absolutely want to try this, right? And the cell phone would pair to a sensor. The cell phone would pair to a pump. And our patients in these trials spent a lot of time just keeping all the devices connected, right? There by no means was this easy to use, right? You may know, or, people who participated in this trial, that we're really, really grateful for everyone's time because they made the systems work and they proved the concept that automated insulin delivery could work. Gradually, these devices, became commercial devices. And when you think about our pump, the t:slim X2 public control IQ technology, right? Everything's embedded into the pump. You've got it all right there. Sure, we have an app you can bolus from the phone, right? That reduces the burden and makes it easier, but you don't have to use that, right? You don't need to keep all the parts connected. Closed loop is active all the time. It didn't start this way. But one of the greatest things I've seen over the years now is the real world outcomes we get from using Control-IQ, for example, are even better than what we saw in the early trials and even the pivotal trials that we did. Because going back to this idea of burden, people are sleeping better. They're seeing those immediate improvements in their blood sugar within a day or two of using Control-IQ. And they're getting these outcomes that stay, for very long periods of time. They talk to me all the time about ease of use. And people are willing to use the devices now because they work so well. And I think it's all about waking up in the morning, with a good night's sleep, feeling rested, having a great day come to you, as a person with diabetes, right? It's not only just about the numbers, but these things really help you be a full person. And that's the transition I've seen doing this research over the years. These quality of life improvements are really tremendous.
I'm curious, what a timeline to look back on. When you were doing, you were a lead investigator for a lot of the clinical trials on these AID systems. Was there a point, I don't want to call it an aha moment, but I'm curious if there was a point when you went from, and I think as you listen, I will try to link up some of our really early episodes and some photos we have of folks who were in those early clinical trials with 2 phones strapped to them and a couple of sensors and different things, right? Was there a moment where you looked at the data or the people in the study for basal IQ maybe, or maybe it was as far as control IQ and said, this really is going to ease the burden? Right.
So I was lucky enough to be an investigator on the basal IQ pivotal trial. And for your listeners, most probably know, but for those who don't, basal IQ is the predictive low glucose suspend system, right? Predictively changing insulin delivery to try to prevent lows. And when we got involved in the basal IQ trial, my first thought was, wow, this is a game changer. I mean, basal IQ and really, first of all, it works really, really well. We still sell this product. And it, was one of these things that, boy, if you could avoid lows and many of the lows throughout the day and especially overnight, again, you start to see all these quality of life improvements. And Basal IQ was the first device out there on the market where you didn't have to reactivate, Basal IQ. You turned it on once and you forgot when the setting screen was because it's on and it just worked. And it came out with the G6 and nobody was doing finger sticks quite as often. And then, it really changed everything when that happened with the Dexcom sensor. So Basal IQ was great. But if Basal IQ was a game changer, Control IQ technology was a life changer. And one of the things I noticed there specifically, and I think a lot of your audience will appreciate, is all the other systems on the market and the things we've tested in academia, they gave a little more insulin, they gave a little less insulin, they, what we call sort of modified your pump's basal rate in the background. But Control IQ does something very different. And, it was great to be involved in a lot of the trials that led to its development and eventually putting it on the Tandem pump, because Control IQ gives what we call auto boluses. Control IQ will give you up to 6 units at a time, up to every hour, separate from what it's doing, modifying the insulin in the background, the basal rate modulation. And what this means is, I'm sure you've seen this, right, is, if you forget to bolus for a small meal and you've forgotten for a little while because you're paying attention to something other than diabetes, you look back at your pump or on your phone app now and you see, oh, the system is taking care of it for me. And it gave me a lot of insulin, right, a few minutes ago that I probably, if I could remember 100% of the time to do this, I wouldn't have given, but I forgot and it worked out great. So these auto boluses were really a life changer. And I think we've seen that play out in, the 420,000 plus people using Control IQ technology today.
All right. Hopefully we'll have some more time at the end to talk more philosophy and more fun stuff. I do have some questions from listeners that I want to get through. We were just talking about Basal IQ. One of the questions I get all the time is about lowering the range at which Control IQ, in whatever mode it's in, will try to keep you. Tide Pool Loop was recently approved with a low of 87. So there's some FDA precedent now. Can you talk a little bit about if there are any plans to move ahead to something that aggressive?
I can't give you a specific timeline, but we are doing trials of, future versions of Control IQ. And if you go into clinicaltrials.gov, you can see the public information posted. But I can say that we do hear a lot of this feedback. We do hear requests for lower targets, changes to auto boluses, things like that. And while I can't make a specific comment on what we're changing, we are absolutely, looking to continually improve things in the future. And, you're not the only one asking this. And so, we are running a number of trials to determine how to get to that next step right now.
Great. And of course, the other question I'm getting is all about compatibility with G7. I promise I'm not going to ask you for a timeline on that. That has been answered. But I am curious if you could talk about, how does this work? Once Dexcom shares the information with Tandem about new sensors, how much work has to happen before an update can be released? And I'm assuming that it is a software update at some point from Tandem.
No, you're exactly right. This is a great question about, any sensor, because we might as well include all the sensors. So I think it's important to understand that, number one, we work very closely with all the different parties who make sensors, and we have the Dexcom G7 integration in development. Yes, it will be a software update, but we set really high expectations for the products we make, and CGM integration is complex. And it's not just the CGM that we have to integrate, but it's, first of all, new pump software. It's, now updates to our Tandem device updater. It's the mobile app that has to know about the G7 or the Abbott sensor, for example. It's our T-Connect portal that now has to display everything correctly, for any device that we get. So we started working with Dexcom on G7 integration as soon as we could. And, we have tied our development closely to the regulatory review and clearance process. We've had a long history of working with them. We integrated the G4, we integrated the G5, right, onto the XT pump, and then the G6 when Basal IQ got added. And, we're trying to get this out as soon as possible, but to really make sure it's the best user experience possible. And hopefully we'll have more news on timeline to share with you soon. But in the meantime, t:slim X pump users should continue to use the G6 system until we make an announcement, and, we'll go from there.
And you answered my next question. I appreciate you bringing up the Abbott Libre. This was just in the last couple of days approved for use in AID systems. I'm honestly a little confused because Libre 2 and Libre 3 were approved. Is Tandem going to be working with both? Will it only be working with the Libre 3? Can you share anything about that process?
Yeah, for your listeners who may not know, Libre 2 and 3 have been out for a while in the United States especially, and were only recently this week cleared for use in an AID system to dose insulin. So that's the new approval. We haven't specified publicly which Libre technology we're going to integrate with, but, we've had an agreement with Abbott back to June 2020, working to integrate and commercialize, these combined solutions, like with an Abbott CGM. So our goal, as we stated it, is to launch an integrated offering within 1 to 2 quarters of Abbott receiving FDA clearance. And we're trying to now, really work to hit that goal. And again, make it a really, really good experience for users.
I'm trying to envision how this would work. Can you talk about how it might work? In other words, if I want to try a Libre and I've been a Dexcom customer, or the other way around, will I be able to tell my pump which sensor and type of sensor I'm using, or do users have to pick a sensor and stick with it?
Right. That's a great question. No, we intend to offer, the ability for you to pick a sensor and just switch, to a sensor. I can't comment on what the exact final product will look like.
Sure.
But our intention is to offer choice to users throughout, and they'll have the most options possible.
Not to belabor the point, but just to be super clear on this. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, one session, I've got a Libre on. I wear that for 2 weeks. And then I say, you know what? I want to try the Dexcom. And so I wear that the very next session. Can I do that with the Tandem pump? Is that something you're working on?
Right. It's something we're working on. Our intention is not to make 7 different versions of a pump that would only pair to one sensor, for example. Exactly.
Got it.
So you could switch.
Right. I mean, and you understand where I'm going here, because that kind of true interoperability is amazing. And we've never, have we ever had that before?
Well, there haven't been so many sensors before. I think it's really important to give credit to FDA for setting up these interoperable guidelines, right? Because in the United States, people may not be aware, but we have what we call iCGM, or interoperable CGM. And FDA really listened to patients and advocate groups. And so, you know what? We can design a regulatory framework, if you will, that, when devices get submitted, you can just add in a sensor, right? Or, you can add in an algorithm, for example. And I think, we should really give them credit for being so forward thinking and creating a framework that we can use to make this happen.
Yeah, it's great to see it come into fruition. Can you give us any update on the Mobi device? I understand that it's in front of the FDA right now, so I know you're very limited likely on what you can say, but I'm still trying to figure out what this might look like in practical use. This is the tiny pump. There's no screen on it. It is entirely phone controlled. Right back to our conversation. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. And I do get a lot of questions about Dexcom coverage for people on Medicare. And that just makes sense, right? It's not as though you stop needing a CGM the minute you turn 65. But the good news is the Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitoring system is covered for Medicare for patients who meet the coverage criteria. If you have either type 1 or type 2 diabetes and intensively manage insulin, you may be covered. To find out more about what that means and if you qualify, check out Dexcom.com/G6-Medicare. I will link that up in the show notes here. You're going to want to talk to your doctor, and you may even be able to get your Dexcom supplies at the pharmacy, saving time and money. Learn more at, again, Dexcom.com/G6-Medicare. Now back to Dr. Pinsker talking about the upcoming Mobi pump and phone control.
That's correct. So to answer your first question, let me go back to that. We are in continued conversations with FDA as they review the Mobi insulin pump for approval. So I can't really comment on timelines or anything like that, except to say the process is ongoing. So the Mobi pump is designed to deliver the same therapy benefits as the t:slim X2 pump, right? It will run Control-IQ technology, but it's in a smaller, discrete form factor. And you are absolutely correct. It's fully phone controlled. You have sort of a phone app that, just like we have with our mobile app today, But in this case, it can run everything. The algorithm still runs on the pump itself, right? So you don't have to have your phone with me 24/7, but you control everything from your personal cell phone. And what we hear a lot is people want the choice to use their personal devices. I think that's why our current mobile app is so popular. You don't need yet another medical device controller weighing down your pockets, right, to interface with the pump. You can use your personal cell phone and get the app from the App Store. So everything will run off your personal phone app. And the idea is you have full control of this small screenless device. There's to be an option for much shorter tubing and different ways to use it with a small sleeve or things like this to really make it easier to wear. And the idea is that we would give more options to patients so people can choose and say, oh, I like this discrete form factor. I'm very comfortable using my phone. Or they can use X2, if they want to use that pump. And our aim is to bring this to market in the second half of 2023. But I really can't say specifically when that can happen.
Right. And I know we will see it soon enough and we'll see it in action. I'm assuming, I know you're not saying, I'm assuming it's going to be approved, but I have this mental picture for years about like this little pump hanging off this dangly tube. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me. And I know that I'm probably missing something. Does it stick to the body? Does it flush on the body?
You're missing a little piece, a little sleeve you have, a little sticker that you need to put on. You can slide it right in and you can wear it really comfortably anywhere. So it doesn't have to sit in your pocket or hang off. It's not going to be hanging
It's not going to be dangling from your arm.
Yeah, no. And I think it'll be a really comfortable wear. And I think it's going to offer a lot of options to a lot of patients for a very discrete form factor.
I just spoke a couple of weeks ago to Liz Gasser. She says, call me Liz, so I try to remember to do that. We talked in depth about a lot of things. I don't want to rehash everything here. We did talk about the Sigi pump that had been newer news at the time. Anything to add on that? I mean, it's really interesting to get this portfolio now that Tandem is looking at. Is there anything specific about Sigi that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, I do think there's some really interesting aspects to Sigi. So for those who are not aware, we acquired this company and the Sigi pump just very recently. And it's a pump that's still in development. So, I can't comment again on actual timing because it depends on many factors, like development, testing, regulatory submissions, different geographies, et cetera. I think what's really interesting about the Sigi pump is the potential, down the road to use, for example, a pre-filled cartridge that could slide into that pump if it is compatible with, should be down the road. And that makes the pump easier to use, right? So in terms of the portfolio, it's really nice to have all these different options, like a patch pump, like something that might be easier to load, all of these things, and bring these out to people, and they can pick and choose what they think the best therapy is for them.
Got it. A lot of listeners sent me questions about, my international listeners, about T-Connect or phone control in international markets, especially in the UK. Can you comment on that at all?
I can only really say that it's a big priority for us to roll out our next generation of T-Connect internationally. It's something we're actively working on, and I think you're going to hear more about this later this year. And of course, bring our mobile app with mobile bolus to every country. Well, I can't give an exact timeline. Sure. That's a big priority for us. I want to bring this up. This is actually a great question you had, because we're seeing so many advantages now to the mobile app, right? On the one hand, you could say, my pump works great. Why do I need this mobile app? But when we released the mobile app with the mobile bolus feature, many people really reported how satisfied they were with this because they didn't have to pull out their pump. They could do it off their personal cell phone. And it just made life so much easier. Wearing your pump somewhere you couldn't easily access it, for example. You didn't have to pull out a medical device to access it. You could do it all from your personal phone. The other thing to think about is how much easier this made this for physicians who you might be seeing in clinic. Because the mobile app, because now people are really using it and leaving it open and not swiping it away on their phone, uploads in the background at regular intervals. All the data your doctor might want is there when you come into clinic. I foresee the end of the days where someone has to say, oh, we're struggling to download the pump, wait a little more in the waiting room, right? Your doctor already has all this information. They could spend more time talking to you and less time trying to get the information off of it. In a way, another big customer who benefited is the physician, who can now spend more time with you because they have all the data from our pump. The mobile app is saying it. So it is a big, all the data. So it's a big priority for us to get that out, and we're working really hard to move that forward internationally.
That's a great point. Yeah, I mean, with all the time we all spend in doctors' offices, you know, I mean,
Right. And, let people spend more time with you and not with, trying to get data off the device. So that's been a big success.
Yeah, I was just thinking about how many times we'd have a pump or a CGM issue, but when it's on mobile, certainly when Dexcom went to Clarity, that made that a lot easier for sure.
Exactly.
Let me ask you about this. My son was asked to be in a study, and it didn't work out for us just in terms of timing and location, about something they were calling Rocket IQ or Rocket AP, I can't remember. And it was all about basically Control IQ, but without meal announcement, just kind of automated. I'm sure this is something that Tandem is looking into with software and different things. Can you talk at all about what's next for this automated delivery system?
Oh, yeah. It's a great question. You are correct. I can't really comment specifically on any specific algorithm or licensing or anything like that. But what you're alluding to is going back to this idea about reducing burden and looking at ways that if we could improve the automation, could we ultimately prevent the need for boluses? Or could we really reduce the amount of times you have to interact with your pump? And those are the kind of things we're really strongly considering, because that's what we want to do. We want to reduce burden. We want you to spend less time touching your pump, not more. So we're looking at, a number of options. I can't get too specific, but of different ways of making the next generation of these products work even better so you can do less. And I think that's what it's all about. So you can pay attention to the rest of your life. And, that's something at Tandem we're always thinking about.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask about people with type 2. At ATTD this year, there were some fantastic studies about people with type 2 using automated systems. It works, it increases time and range, which I don't think is a surprise to anybody. I was curious on this, how do people with type 2 feel about this? Are they excited? I don't know if I can answer if they're excited about it, but there is this, it seems, my husband lives with type 2. We know a lot of people with type 2, and there seems to be this feeling if I need an insulin pump, I've totally failed.
Yeah, no, that's a common question. And I am going to answer this question.
Great.
And so I think it's a great question. I do have to start by saying Control IQ technology is not approved for use in individuals with type 2 diabetes. I have to be clear. The algorithm is only approved for type 1. But I think what you're getting at is at the diabetes technology meeting late last year, we released results from our first type 2 trial. And this was an investigational study, to be clear, but it was a multi-center study of adults living with type 2 who were on insulin and used our pump. And the study met all the clinical endpoints. Of course, there were tremendous improvements in glycemic control. But to answer your question specifically, how participants felt, participants indicated a very high level of satisfaction with the system. And I think they all realized, they can absolutely do this, and the system works really, really well. We are going to further explore type 2 in the future, but I can't give you any details, publicly here.
Sure.
That has to wait for our earnings call and other things. But, it absolutely works very well. And I think we're seeing people be really satisfied. And we're really happy when you can share that data.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. Everybody with any kind of diabetes deserves whatever technology they want. I think it's great.
Exactly.
I would also be remiss if I didn't ask you. You alluded to your military experience earlier. Can we talk about that for a minute? Because boy, I get questions all the time from parents. Can my kid really not serve in the military? Is diabetes, still disqualifying? I'm curious, do you think that will change? I've already seen some studies of it seems like they're looking at it. There's one or two people that seem to have kind of made it through.
Right. That's a great question. So I retired after, 20 years of service in the Army as a physician, and I really enjoyed my time there. And what I learned is that although having type 1 diabetes is a disqualifying condition for joining the Army, there are another number of individuals, and in the greater military in general, who were able to stay in if they were diagnosed once they were ready in the service. And it is very individualized. But I think what it comes down to is, the military is sort of very concrete in their thinking, right? In that everyone has to be able to be a soldier and do everything physically that all soldiers can do. So, for example, I deployed to Iraq in 2009 for almost a year. And, it was 135 degrees in the desert some days. And what happens to your insulin, and your insulin pump in those conditions, right? It makes it hard for anyone out there, let alone if you have really any chronic medical condition, not just diabetes. So I do see where the different military services come from and that they want everyone prepared to go anywhere. And I think it's more on a case by case basis of people being allowed to stay in the military if they are diagnosed, depending on, what their job is and what they're doing.
We've talked to a couple of the folks that have been able to stay in. It's pretty remarkable. They are tough stuff, man.
Right. And they're great people. And I, just to share personally, I'm so grateful for my time being this because I met people from all over the country and all over the world, really. So I'll share a story with you. I was at one point the chief of pediatric endocrinology at Tripler Army Medical Center. And if you ever go to Honolulu, and you're on vacation or you go there and you leave the airport, you'll see this giant pink set of buildings, right on the highway as you leave the main airport in Honolulu on Oahu. And that's Tripler Army Medical Center. It's a great place. And I spent 7 years there. And one of the really interesting things that happened there that you might not think about was travel. And so we were sort of the hub for all the small military bases all around the Pacific Rim. And if you had diabetes, you would come to see us. You might have a family that had to be relocated. And actually the military, by the way, has a great system called the Exceptional Family Member Program that says, oh, you have someone with medical needs. Maybe you can't be stationed in pick a remote location, right? But they came to see us and we would have them, you could still be a airplane mechanic, somewhere else. Maybe you go to Virginia, maybe that. And, we make allowances and innate allowances to let people have successful military careers, even if they had a son or daughter, for example, who's diagnosed with type 1, and really work with families to make that happen, which is great. But one of the things we had to deal with was people were traveling all over the Pacific Rim and, you cross the international date line. So back then, if you were on injections, or even today, for example, and you take a long-acting insulin, you take some rapid-acting insulin, what do you do for your insulin dose when, you leave and you arrive 18 hours before you left, or vice versa, right? And how do you figure this out? So we published a number of guidelines in different articles that still physicians are using today on how to adjust, your insulin doses, especially for, injections. And that was great because I think it helped a lot of people. And those are used now throughout the world. What's really nice now with pumps, and especially with automated insulin delivery, is you can fly somewhere, land, and change the time on your pump. For example, if they have Control IQ active, and let the algorithm deal with it, right? It'll know your new settings, you've changed the time, but the algorithm every 5 minutes is working in your favor. And we didn't have that in the past. So we made these worksheets for physicians, but and it's so nice to see this evolve to the point where we, again, can simplify it, reduce the burden, and let the computer do a lot of the work, right? Rather than us having to finish this all manually.
It's interesting, and that's really amazing to hear. It makes so much sense with the travel and everything else. We've done those time zones that mess everything up. Years ago, when my son had a dumb pump, a regular pump, I used to complain all the time that I wanted a pump that I could program and tell it to give, 30% less basal during basketball practice. Because I knew every Tuesday at 3:00, he'd be at basketball practice. Why couldn't I put the timer in the pump? And of course, come to find out, the pump company's working on much bigger issues and things like exercise mode and, making things like setting a timer kind of irrelevant when the computer is doing all the work in the background. What am I not asking about, Dr. Pinsker? What big picture stuff have I missed?
You've asked some great questions, right? Of course, we have exercise, right, and sleep activity, trying to accommodate these activities. I think there are times where, as much as I'd like everything to be automatable, we all understand, right? There's still a lot of involvement from the user of the device or families who are helping. And, we're doing everything we can to minimize the need to do that, whether that's around meals, whether that's around exercise. So I think those are the two big themes that, we're trying to work on to make it easier to use. So you don't have to remember, did I set exercise activity, an hour ahead of time, right? Because a lot of the times, and your listeners will know, if you change these settings in mealtime and your blood sugar is already dropping, it is very difficult to prevent, for example, low blood sugar. There's still work to do to make these more automated, if you will, around these challenging activities.
Before I let you go, we've talked about big issues. We've talked a lot about Tandem. I'm really curious, as a pediatric endocrinologist, my son was diagnosed right before he turned 2, and we've been very fortunate to see the same doctor. He is 18. What is it like from your end? When you see kids come in, I got to imagine over the years what you say to them has changed a little bit in terms of the technology, but not that much in terms of dealing with life with diabetes. I mean, a very open-ended question here, but I would just be curious from your perspective, like, what has that been like for you?
I think what we've seen is a true, genuine experience of being now very, very hopeful and positive and telling people from day one, you can do this. 20 years ago, we didn't have sensors. We had finger sticks with big lancets, and we had insulins that were very slow. And it was complicated and a lot of work. And by no means am I saying it's not complicated now.
Sure.
It's still a lot of work. But I think what people see now is the technology works so well, and people are able to see the benefits of it so quickly and start using these technologies so quickly. They learn very quickly, I can do this. Or, if you are a family member supporting your child, I can help my child. This can be positive. I can work with other families and advocacy groups, which I think is so important, that people who are newly diagnosed hook up with another family and say, this is how we do this. Let me teach you where we shop for snacks and things, little things like that. But also the therapies really, really do work. We've seen in the last few years, when you think about when Control-IQ came out, how much improvements we've seen in the outcomes. And coming into clinic should really be a positive message, right? When you come to see me, it should be, how are things going? How can we help you live your life and improve on things and emphasize the success you're having? And I think, we all now see people are having success with these technologies, and to really share that message that you can do this and be successful and live your life. And I think that's so important.
Thank you so much for joining me. This was kind of a wide-ranging interview, but there's a lot to talk to you about. I hope you come back and share more information about Tandem and maybe some of the other issues we talked about as well. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Stacey, and thank you to all the listeners. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd love to come back.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
More information at diabetes-connections.com. And I know we just touched on the surface of a lot of issues there, including what exactly is going to happen with Abbott, with the Libre integration. As usual, they're very limited in what they can say. So we will be talking about that on a future episode. And again, I have reached out to the folks at Insulet who make Omnipod because they have an agreement with Abbott as well. But it's really exciting, right? We're really nearing that interoperability that we have been talking about for more than 10 years now. And I've shared before, my son uses the t:slim X2 and Dexcom, but my husband, who has type 2, has used the Libre on and off. He started with the 2. He did try the Libre 3. It's so tiny. He really liked it. And for my family, this could really make a difference because there have been times when, we've had supply issues or, Dexcom stuff happens, and Benny has grabbed a Libre from Slade, from my husband, just so he doesn't have to finger prick. And of course, it doesn't integrate with the system, but he certainly likes having a CGM better than doing 1 billion finger sticks a day. So if he could use this kind of seamlessly back and forth when he needs to, that would be huge. And I know there are many who would use it in a more practical way, right? Worried about costs and all of that. Just more options are always better. Another personal story to tell you about. I want to talk a little bit about Benny, and he's moving forward in his independence. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by ViviCap. Keeps your insulin at the exact right temperature, even in extreme heat or cold. And I've been talking about this for a while, and I get a lot of questions about it. So real quick, it works with any insulin pen. It is interchangeable between pens. It does not need any batteries. You do not charge it. You do not need water or ice packs. It is self-contained, and it is amazing. No, it is not for vials yet. They are working on that. But we use this as kind of a backup. Our main prescription is for insulin vials, but our doctor always writes a backup every year so we can get a couple of pens, just in case something happens with the pump so Benny can inject. So that's what we do. We keep a pen with the ViviCap on it in Benny's bag, and it keeps it at the exact right temperature. And the best part about this is it lasts for years. They have a 2-year warranty on it, 30-day money-back guarantee. You're really going to love it. To order, go to the link at diabetes-connections.com, or there's a link in the show notes as well. And I got another question. They do have discounts online quite a bit on their own website. If you go through my link, you will still get all of those discounts. So check it out today. We really love it. ViviCap, confidence on the go. Longtime listeners know my son Benny is going to college in the fall. No, I don't know where he's going yet. He will be making that decision in the next couple of weeks. But we have been working toward his independence for a very long time, and he does everything himself now. But he does not yet order his own supplies. And he came to me last month and said, I'd really like to start doing that. So, of course, I took a beat because I don't know about you, that's like the worst part. You really have to stay on top of it. And I'm very reluctant to let that go. But we compromised and I gave it all to him. Again, I am the backup plan. What does that mean practically? It means that I set him up on all of our websites, ordering, all that kind of thing, in his name with his email address with my phone number. So if there are texts that need to go through, if they need to contact somebody, they've got both of us on the account. And yes, I will change that in the years to come. But I think at 18, as a senior in high school, that makes me more comfortable. He's absolutely fine. I'm sure I won't need to use it much. But we had the bad timing here we had some insurance changes. So we are now in the process of moving all of our supply ordering, get this, to Amazon. Amazon is now our pharmacy. And I know some of you are nodding like, yeah, big deal. We've been doing that for years. But some of you are probably just like me. What? Amazon? So poor Benny had to go through the process of finding out all of his prescriptions from the pharmacy, getting a printout, putting them into Amazon. It actually was kind of good timing in a way. He really learned about how many prescriptions he has. We got rid of some old stuff. It was a very good educational experience. And then, of course, that's just for pharmacy. We had to do the durable medical pump stuff through another company. And I will not be mentioning any names, but it rhymes with Smedge Park. And bless their hearts, as we say here, boy, are they holding things up to the point where I had to reach out to my local community. This was not Benny's fault at all, and ask for cartridges. And, maybe I shouldn't be talking about this so openly, but you know the drill. My local community, the moms group I have here in the Charlotte area, we really help each other out whenever anybody needs supplies. I haven't had to ask for something in a very long time. And I can't tell you how amazing these ladies are. They came through. Absolutely amazing. So thank you all. I got so many offers to help. And it turns out somebody right in my town just dropped everything off on my porch. So thank you so much, Liz, for that. But I'll keep you posted on Amazon. I think this is really interesting. And I know they offer their own medical doctor concierge kind of coverage. So if anybody's doing that, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. I'm setting up an interview with GoodRx. I've been wanting to talk to them for a while. So this whole pharmacy thing is just fascinating to see it play out in my family. And I'll be posting in the Facebook group about GoodRx before I interview them so I can get your questions. Just looking at the calendar, we have some family stuff coming up. And Benny will be looking at those few colleges left on his list to narrow that down. I have some local diabetes mom events. But the big story for me is the first weekend of May, I will be going to Ireland for the Thrivabetes Conference. I have linked up information on that. Anybody in the UK, I would love to meet you. So that is in Dublin, the first weekend of May. Then I have my daughter's graduation. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about that. And, more to come. I'm adding events all the time. So let me know if you want me to come speak to your group. Diabetes-connections.com. Click on the community page. You can see everything about where we're going. And also, I have now listed all of the talks that I do. Happy to add one for you if you'd like something that is personalized for your group. But you can see all the talks that I offer right there on the website. Thank you, as always, to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here soon. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.